Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Hope you're all doing okay. Thanks for stopping by this video. If you're new or coming back, hope you enjoy this video. It's a little different from what I usually do, playing guitar, or bass, or drums, or whatnot. I do like to make these occasional biography videos and whatnot. So today, I'm going to focus on this guy right here, Cliff Burton from Metallica, who died way too young, at the age of 24 in 1986. September 27th, 1986. So basically, to look at Cliff's life and death, I suppose you kind of have to take it, we'll say the day before he died. Metallica played their last show with Cliff on September 26th, 1986. And I've seen a lot of pictures throughout the years of that show, and the crowd is just massive. Like, Metallica were on their way up. They were going to be a headlining act. They weren't going to need a support act anymore. Had Cliff not passed, a lot of the way their touring was laid out for the next couple of months would have happened, and but after Cliff died, so that had to all been put on hold until later on, until they recruited a new bass player. Cliff also did a photo shoot. There's a lot of pictures from that photo shoot, and some people, when I say that was actually the last photo shoot that Cliff Burton had ever done, they're like, oh wow, really? I can never really notice. But there's one that stands out with him himself, and there's one where it's him and the group and whatnot. And he also did a short interview. I believe he did. Somebody, I can't remember the name of the guy who did the interview, but it was very short. I've seen just maybe clips of what this guy asked Cliff about, but for all everything, for all intents and purposes, it was just it was sad, to think that the next morning that he would be dead. It's it's terrible. So not long after the photo shoot and the short interview, Metallica went out and played, and a really neat thing that I always thought very really cool and crazy in a way is that James had broke his wrist in a skateboarding accident a month and a half, 2 months before, and he had his in a cast. So he felt good enough for that last show with Cliff to have his cast removed and being back to playing rhythm guitar again, because they had their roadie John Marshall filling in for James. James was singing, and John Marshall was playing rhythm. So I think it's kind of neat in a way that James got to play music with Cliff one last time. You can look at it like that. It's just like, James' wrist was healed, and it was a really good show. There's bootlegs of that last show, obviously, on the internet or whatnot. I've had that last show downloaded 20-some years ago, more than that actually, and it was a good show. It sounded great. There were, James was playing straight on. It just perfect. He just it's like he never took a break for 2 months or whatever it was it took for his wrist to heal. So it's really neat that James got one last time to play with Cliff before Cliff died. I don't know if he ever looks at it like that or anybody ever does, but it just was really cool to see that James returned to playing rhythm guitar. And there's a few pictures in the crowd that show the band on stage, and when you see James holding his guitar, and you're thinking, wow, he got to jam with Cliff one last time, not jam, play a concert with Cliff one last time. I think he probably thought, if he ever did think of that, I'm sure he thought it was very special and whatnot. So basically, after the show, there's one picture taken of Cliff backstage, and he's there, and he's just casually just standing there, and that turned out to be the last picture of him taken alive by anybody. So basically, the band boarded the bus. They were going from where they were in Stockholm, Sweden. They were on their way to Copenhagen, Denmark, and to play another show. And that night, I remember I read an interview with Lars, and he said that him and Cliff were the last ones to go to sleep that night. What makes that last bus trip very significant and almost sad is that they couldn't decide who they wanted to Excuse me, who wanted the first choice of bunks, because the bus that they had on this European tour was a terrible bus. Uh, from what I've read and seen in documentaries and whatnot, it was like more like a I don't. It wasn't a touring bus that you would tour on. With have bunks and whatnot in and all that. Like Metallica sound guy Mick Hughes, he said that the bunks they were sleeping in were just bolted in to, I'm not sure what the mechanism is, and they had cardboard over the windows. No, I'm not sure if that was to keep out. That's probably just to keep the sun out, or whatever. So it was a really, really bad bus. Kirk said that it was a bad bus, and so did Mick Hughes. He said it was a bad bus as well. This can be seen in the 1998 Metallica documentary. I think it was put out by probably MTV or something like that. Um, okay, no, I believe it was VH1 Behind the Music Metallica. Yes, that's what it is. I think it was from 1998, late 98, and the band talked about their recollections of that night. So basically, they couldn't figure out who wanted to sleep where on the bus. So they said, well, then we'll draw cards to see who gets first choice of bunks. So, Kirk told this story, and he said in 1992, I think the MTV rockumentary, he said, I never told anybody this before, and apparently he didn't. But anyhow, they drew cards to see who would get first choice of bunk, and Cliff drew the ace of spades, and the rest of the guys got terrible cards. So Cliff had first choice of bunk, of whose bunk he wanted. So he said he looked at Kirk. Kirk said to him, he said to Kirk, I want your bunk, Kirk. Kirk said, fine, whatever, I'll sleep up front, and better anyway, kind of thing. So Cliff had first choice, and he picked Kirk's bunk. And it's very sad to think about it like that, because it would have been Kirk sleeping in that bunk when the accident happened, and it would have been him who would have been killed. It wouldn't have been Cliff. So that's a really sad detail. But I'll rewind a little bit here. So about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, Kirk says that he heard like a skidding, a vibration, and then this motion. He said he felt all that. And what it was the bus driver, who I think, and this is my opinion, I think that he fell asleep at the wheel. I think that he fell asleep, and when he woke up from being whatever, maybe feeling the road, him going off the road almost, and when he overcorrected to get himself back onto the road, when he did that, the back end swung right around, and then boom, it just started to roll, like it was jump, like John Marshall explained it in that documentary, how it like went down or whatnot. So, Lars said it was like being flipped around like a piece of clothing in a dryer, and Kirk said that he thought that they were going off a cliff, which is a strange word there. So yeah, then John Marshall explained that how the back end of the bus come around and started just chopping as it went, and then it rolled, and then it landed in the ditch of the side of the road near Ljungby, Sweden, I believe is the place. I'm not pronouncing it the best. And then James said, he said, I got woke up, hot coffee being poured all over me, and he said the bus was on its side. So the bus was on its side, people were trapped inside, and Kirk had said that he heard everybody screaming, but he didn't hear Cliff. And then he said immediately, something is wrong here. So it was on its side, there was an emergency hatch at the top, which Kirk opened, and when he opened it and got out, he said he turned around and he seen Cliff's legs sticking out from underneath the bus. And basically, I don't think that's an image you could ever get out of your head. And he said he looked and saw Cliff's legs there, and he was on his way to being in shock. He didn't know what was going on. And some other people started coming out from underneath the bus too. And they said that the bus driver went over and started pulling on a blanket that was underneath the bus next to Cliff. And Kirk and James freaked right out. Don't take that away from him, They went to move Cliff. They tried to pull him out or whatnot, try to get some movement out of him when they grabbed his legs, and they said, he's not moving. So Cliff right there was pinned underneath the bus. If this is like the bus on its side, his legs were sticking out, but yet his waist up was still in the bus. So when it threw him through the window, the bus landed and it had his waist on his waist up on the inside of the bus, and from his waist down to his legs was out of the bus. So it was, he got thrown out the window, and boom, the bus landed on top of him. So so there was like total confusion. Everybody that was there on the bus, they didn't know what was going on when they got out until they seen Cliff, and then they realized that something was wrong with Cliff. So Cliff was pinned underneath the bus. There was no movement from him. I mean, it's you would assume that, and you hope that Cliff. Lars said that by all accounts he never even woke up. I believe that, and I really wish that that was the case in a way. But I mean, the tumbling of the bus would have woke anybody up. But he probably wouldn't have had time to realize what was happening to him and what was, how he was going to get thrown through the window, pinned underneath the bus, and basically crushed. It probably crushed all his internal organs. It was terrible, and you want to wish that he never did wake up, because that is so cruel and so tragic and whatnot. So finally what they did was they got a crane that showed up to lift the bus up, to get everybody else that was trapped underneath the bus, in the bus or whatnot, and pull Cliff out. Now this is the saddest thing about Cliff Burton's death. It's one thing to have an accident, have the bus land on you and kill you, or maybe you survived and you're waiting to be pulled out, but I don't think so. But they said that when the crane came and they hooked the chains up around the bus and they lifted the bus up off the ground to pull him out, and before they could do that, they had lifted it up, and before they went to pull him out, the bus fell from the crane and landed on the ground again. So basically Cliff Burton got hit by the bus twice. Not hit, but the bus landed on him twice. And the sound guy was saying, I don't know if Cliff was dead at this point or not, because the bus actually fell back down on the ground. And that's just sad. I mean, if he was dead, he wouldn't have felt that, so that's a good thing. It's a comforting thought in my mind, anyhow. So, Cliff had the bus landed on him a second time, and it was just, I'm sure they were all crying and they were in shock. They just could not believe what was happening. So when they finally eventually did take and lift the bus up again, they pulled him out, but he was dead. So nobody knows for sure when he was killed, or I believe that he did get thrown through the window and the bus landed on him and it killed him. And if he barely felt that, if he barely knew what was going on because it was so early in the morning, and I just hope that he was asleep. If he wasn't, he was very close to not. He knew nothing about what was going on, and it killed him. Now, Cliff Burton is one of my heroes. Like, I play bass, not the best bass player, but Cliff died in '86. I was born in '82, so obviously, I cannot relate to their music that early. But it's a tragedy, for it to happen, and then you lift it up to pull him out, and he was unresponsive to any efforts of anybody trying to help him or whatnot. He wasn't moving, so Cliff was gone. So Lars said later on that when they went to the hospital, because I believe Lars broke his toe, I think that's what it was. They were in the hospital just to get checked out, and he said the doctor came in and told us that our bass player had died, and Lars said that it was just too unreal to just deal with it. He's like, it was just, it was hard, to understand. And so once everybody was taken care of, they said they just went back to the hotel room and they just drank, because they were a drinking band, Metallica. They drink, none of that drug stuff, just drinking. And Kirk said that he heard James down on the street corner at 4 o'clock in the morning screaming, Cliff, where are you? Just freaking out, drunk, screaming. And Kirk said that he heard that and he broke into tears. He was just devastated. They were all devastated. So basically, when the accident happened and Cliff died, they arrested the driver. They took him in for questioning, and they said, what happened here? And he claims that he hit a patch of black ice. Now, I'm not familiar with that climate of where it happened in Sweden, where the crash occurred. But September 27th, where I'm from, and I'm in I have 4 seasons here, and it's very, very, when winter's here kind of thing. I don't buy the fact that there was black ice on the road that he slipped on. I don't believe that. And James said he walked for miles looking for this black ice, saying that he didn't know where this black ice was, and he was gonna end this guy right there, is what he said. So I don't know if I buy the black ice thing. I think he fell asleep at the wheel, and when he woke up, it was too late to overcorrect himself to get back on on the road, and the accident happened. That's what I think happened. I don't think that he hit a patch of black ice at all. Uh, whether anybody in Metallica thinks about it now and thinks about, I don't believe they believe that it was, just a simple thing as on some black ice and boom, you roll a tour bus and you kill some, and I think there's more to it. But he was never charged as a driver. They labeled it, just an accident or whatnot. And he was still known for driving bands around Europe after this tragedy happened. After the accident that killed Cliff Burton with him at the wheel, he was still going on for I don't know how many years driving bands around in buses. That I think, maybe it was, an accident with Cliff and there was no way they could charge him. But the fact that he was still doing that job, months after, years after Cliff died, I think it's kind of like, it's not right. This guy killed a legend, although, I don't know how I feel about it. I guess I don't know if he should have served any jail time or whatnot. It was an accident, I guess you could say. But there's just it's too many factors, too many ideas and thoughts when you think about it, and you think about him saying, I just think he fell asleep at the wheel and woke up too late. That's what I think. Although he testified that earlier that day he did have sleep. He slept in the daytime. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But nighttime, no matter how much you sleep, if you fall asleep at the wheel at night, you're gonna fall asleep at the wheel. You're gonna wake up and something crazy is gonna happen most of the time. So anyhow, so what happened with Cliff was unfortunate. It was sad. They postponed the tour they were doing, and they returned to America to have Cliff's funeral and whatnot. And they didn't resume. I believe it was late October, 1986. They didn't. Jason Newsted. They found Jason Newsted. He auditioned, then they chose him, and the tour resumed. And they went to Japan, and they went to all these places, just as a headliner. And then they were going to come back, I think, and play more shows with Ozzy, because Ozzy took Metallica as the opening act for his 1986 Summer Ultimate Sin tour. Metallica was the opening act, and I think they were going to do few more dates with Ozzy, and then they were going to be their own support. They wouldn't need a supporting act anymore. That was just my cell phone. My wife texted me. So yeah, I have right here in my hand. This is a copy of Cliff's. When you go to a funeral, they'll give you a little memory card, just like a little tribute thing, talking about the person whose funeral you're at. Now it's paper. Now this is actually the exact the card that was used at Cliff's funeral. It's in the front. See, it's not in color, and the person who actually gave this to me had the original one, but it was thick. It was like a cardboard type material. This here, it's just paper, but it's got a tree on the front, and it says "in remembrance." And then when you open it up, there's a poem. There's a poem there, and then right here it says "in memory of Clifford Lee Burton, born February 10th, 1962 in California, at rest September 27th, 1986 in Sweden. Services October 7th, 1986, 1 p.m. Tuesday, United Methodist Church, Castro Valley, Reverend Nadine Dewitt, interment private." And then on the back, on behalf of the family, we wish to express their gratitude for your many kindnesses evidenced in thought and deed, and for your attendance at the visitation service. Then it says, Member Order of the Golden Rule, Chapel of the Valley, 20359 Lake Shabbat Road, Castro Valley, California 94546. So this is a copy. If you went to Cliff's funeral, you were given one of these, but they're, like I said, they were harder. This is just plastic. And I got this on eBay a long time ago, a real long time ago. The person who sold the original sold it for quite a bit of money. Like, it was like quite a significant amount of money. But I said, you know, I couldn't afford it. The bidding got so high. And this, it was a girl, I believe. She said, you know what, I'll make you a copy of it and I'll send it to you. So this is the copy that she sent me. And it's exact in every way, except the fact that, you know, it doesn't, it's not like a cardboard type material. But I treasure this very much. To know that I have a copy of the funeral card that was given out at his funeral. I treasure this quite a bit. And I have some signed Metallica stuff with Cliff Burton as well, that I really treasure. So, yeah, like I pretty much said pretty much everything I think that can be said about what happened to Cliff. It was just terrible, terrible, you know. And Kirk says, you know, to this day that it could have been him, it could not have been him, but had Kirk been in his bunk and Cliff not chose his, it would have been Kirk who would have been killed. So Kirk should be thanking God for every day that he's alive on this planet, because it would have been him. It wouldn't have been Cliff. It would have been Kirk. So, Cliff is still very much missed. His death in 1986. That's 37 years ago. 86, 96. Yeah, 1986. It's so long ago that a lot of new fans don't even know who Cliff Burton was. So they have to do the research and find out who was this Cliff Burton felt, But anyhow, I think that had Cliff not died, Metallica probably would have stayed going heavy. I mean, their music was obviously heavy afterwards. I mean, they're still making music. But people always say, well, what would Cliff Burton think? Would Cliff Burton approve of this? What do you think? Just kind of thing. And Cliff was one who stated in interviews, we do what we want to do. If anybody considers that selling out, then whatever. That's what he said in a famous interview. So he wasn't even against making music videos. When they asked, they did an interview with James and Cliff in March or April, maybe '86. They were asked if they were going to do an interview, and Cliff said, "Nah, it's just a matter of time." He said, it's basically saying that we'll probably make a video. It's just a matter of time, Unfortunately, time that he didn't have time to see them make a video, which they made for one, off of Justice for All in 1988. But there's a lot of things that people say Cliff was against and what he wasn't against. But Cliff had the attitude. He had this personality. He was very, very smart. Cliff was a really smart guy, and he said, he ran that band. Actually, the photographer Ross Halpin, he said that Cliff Burton ran Metallica. He said absolutely nothing happened in that band without his consent. If Cliff said no, it was no. If Cliff liked it, good. They all relied on Cliff because Cliff was very, very smart guy, very intelligent. He had respect. For a 24-year-old guy, he had a lot of everything. He was just incredible. And so the world lost a good musician, good person, because of some guy driving a bus who, like I said, fell asleep. Cliff played no part in his own death. He went to sleep and never woke up. I mean, if you're gonna go, you're gonna go, I suppose. But it's I pray that he was dead after the first initial, the impact of the bus landing on him, than having, lift up the bus and drop it again on the ground, landing on Cliff again. Just, you don't even want to think about that. It's terrible. So you pray to God that God took him, when it threw him through the window and landed on him the first time. I believe that's how he died. He died the first time. So yeah, it's just this is a little tribute video to people who don't know Cliff or never heard of Cliff maybe, and you just want an introduction to Cliff. He played on the first 3 Metallica albums. You know, he had signature songs, and you know, the Call of Cthulhu, Orion, Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth. Like, he's just a phenomenal bass player. He'll always be in the ranks of the top 10 greatest bass players of all time. Totally, he'll always be in the top 10 for sure. And like Flea, the bass player for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, when he inducted Metallica into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009, he spoke more about Cliff Burton than what the guys in Metallica did. I think Kirk was the only one that made reference to Cliff Burton in his acceptance speech. He just said, "I want to thank musicians, you know, Cliff Burton." The rest of the guys didn't say anything about Cliff, which I really find ridiculous. But they had Cliff's father speak about Metallica and speak about Cliff and whatnot. But for the other guys to not say anything about Metallica, is always found that bizarre. You know, like, you could have easily have said, you know, hold up your thing or whatever. You know, this is for you, Cliff, man. We wish you could be here right now. It would be so awesome. But anyhow, Flea, who is also one of the greatest bass players ever, said that Cliff Burton ruled. He said that every Cliff Burton solo that he ever heard was amazing, mind-blowing. He said, he's like, it was a trip every time he'd hear a Cliff Burton bass solo. He said he was just, you know, amazing, blown away. And then he says Cliff Burton rules. So if you're going to take the top 10 bass players or whatever at the time, if you put Flea ahead of Cliff, Flea would be the first guy to admit, no. Cliff Burton is way better than what I ever hoped or could be. I'm sure he would say that, because at that induction ceremony, he went on about Cliff for a good while, probably because he's a bass player, right? And so to take like a top 10 list, which are stupid lists anyways, I don't think anybody should be. Just everybody's different. For him to say that Cliff Burton rules, you know, makes me think that if Cliff was number 7 on a list of 10 and Flea was 4, Flea wouldn't agree with it. You look at it that way, I guess. But anyhow, so rest in peace, Cliff. We just, you know, so many people miss you when they think about you. And, you know, your father passed away not that long ago. And yeah, it's just, people will find out, you know, as the years go by, new fans, younger people will find out about Cliff Burton and realize how incredible of a bass player he was. Like, he was fantastic. Really, really fantastic. I played bass, but I could never, ever come close to anything that Cliff would ever do, like, ever did or whatnot. He's just too good. Really too good. So, yeah, here's my little video about Cliff Burton, what happened to him and whatnot. I probably could have said a lot more. I probably messed this up a lot. It's 27, almost 28 minutes. But what I'll do is I'll read it back, watch it back, and see if it's worthwhile to put online. So anyhow, I hope you guys are all doing good out there, staying safe. You know, COVID's still around, but use caution and whatnot, and everything will be alright. So, thanks for watching this video. See you in the next one.